Perfect. We'll kick this thing off. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I'm here in Zoom land with Mark Freeman, recently appointed CEO of ProDirectional. Mark, huge congrats. Welcome to the show. How's everything in your world today, man?
Thank you. Thank you. Today, everything is amazing. Everything is amazing. Very exciting start to 2023.
Right?
And yeah, and looking forward to another fun and exciting year in oil and gas.
Yeah, no, I think we've got some good runway ahead of us. But you mentioned an exciting kickoff to 2023. Last night, my wife and I were getting ready for bed, and we just couldn't help but keep laughing about this Chinese balloon, spy
Oh my
balloon thing that's been going on. I mean, between the memes and the headlines and the denials and the accusations, I mean, what? I don't.
I mean, I have to admit, like the first time I saw something published on this, I really thought I literally thought it was a joke. I
Me,
thought
I
because
know.
I'm like, of all the technology that we have, it's a balloon. I mean, come on,
I,
right?
yeah, and again, there's so much like, oh, they're spying on this, that, and the other. I am, don't want to claim to be an expert in that field because I just a lot of times read the headlines and try to at least keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on. But and not, don't worry, folks, we're going to talk about oil and gas, but this is front and center of headlines right now, and so I wanted to talk about it. So apparently, it flew over Canada before coming into the U.S. And I'm Canadian, so I can make fun of myself here. But I guess I don't think it was Trudeau, but it was someone out there in the Canadian Armed Forces was like, we just didn't want to disrupt anyone and have missiles flying overhead, so we just decided to ignore it and let it, essentially fly down into the U.S. I'm thinking, yeah, you don't want to, ruin someone's day by having a missile fly overhead, but yet it's kind of a risk. Wouldn't you rather, address it accordingly? But again,
That's
I had
amazing.
to laugh. Right. But anyway, that good comical start there. So Mark, for you, as someone whose company's success is tied to rig count and
Yeah.
drilling activity, are you tuning into everyone's earnings seasons and reports coming out? And I mean, I'm sure you're listening to what people are telling Wall Street. Is this an exciting time for you to kind of get a glimpse as to what's coming?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously our business is rig count, right? So,
Yeah.
so we're always watching that. We're always looking at earnings season. We're always looking at, okay, what's driving potential decision making as we move forward? Obviously, commodity price, which natural gas has had a not fun start to the year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So definitely, expecting some degree of rebalancing between natural gas and oil as we head through 2023, from an activity perspective. But yeah, we're always, or I personally am always, and certainly, my leadership team and board of directors is always looking at, okay, what's going on with our clients, what's going to be driving their decision making when it comes to 2023 in terms of how they're going to develop their assets, and
Yeah.
then subsequently, what's that going to mean for ProDirectional from a market perspective and rebalancing between different basins, or just strategically, and also looking at a longer term view as well, right?
Yeah.
Because even though for sure, we're going to see, some degree of rig count decline in natural gas basins as we progress throughout 2023. Also very bullish on the long term when it comes to natural gas. It's a great fuel source. LNG capacity is going to be continuing to expand, in future years, which
Yeah.
means the U.S. is going to become an even more important exporter of that very important natural resource. And so just knowing that, even though that's going to impact the short term, also keeping an eye on what's going to happen in the long term and what that's going to mean for our business as well.
Yeah, no, it's and again, like we were talking before, I'm in the same space. My we make money by cutting sacks at the hopper. And so with less drilling activity means less revenue, which means we have to adapt accordingly. And but from a macro perspective, and again, I'm no economist, but looking at the fundamentals and energy demand and natural gas consumption and the estimated demand moving forward, to your point, I think we've got a good runway ahead of us. And while natural gas is taking a beating, we're in the $2 range now. It's again, like, just the long-term expectations of consumption, the electrification of everything. I think
Yep.
I think people can kind of hang, well, you never want to take too much of a gamble, but you can hang your hat on knowing, based like the Haynesville, and Marcellus is kind of tough with their takeaway capacities, but at the end of the day, it's, we are now the global leader of LNG export with, like you said, I think there's 3 terminals being in construction to increase capacity. So, which is exciting, right? Regardless if you're tied to rig count or, whether you're in the midstream side or gas, compressing side, the reality is that really just helps increase our energy security, which I don't know if you saw
100.
yesterday, Biden made points about kind of acknowledging the fact that oil and gas are vital to our nation's energy security. And so it was nice to hear. And again, regardless of which side of the fence you stand on, it's been an interesting roller coaster, with macroeconomics and commodity prices. But again, all in all, like I said, I'm excited, similar to you, where we're at now. I think the sort of flat line in activity is going to kind of help rebalance things, especially on the supply chain side and hopefully cost input side. But nonetheless, we're off to a good start, I think, here. But before we keep going in oil and gas stuff, Mark, something that really caught my attention, which is partially why I reached out, is I wanted to start by asking about a post that you had made a while back that didn't have to do with directional drilling, but more so it was when you were fundraising and raising money for Mental Health America of Greater Houston for the Chevron Marathon. And I'd like for you to speak on that and how you got into that and why that's something that's close to your heart.
Yeah, well, oh gosh, thanks for asking about that. So I actually, a really good friend of mine had reached out to me. Her name is Liz Swigert, and I got to know Liz over the last few years. And Liz had reached out to me and asked if I was interested in joining the board at Mental Health America of Greater Houston. And she knew mental health was something that I was passionate about. It's been something that has touched my life in a variety of different ways. Either close personal relationships I have with people that have had say mental health challenges or issues that they've had to address and work through, and just going through the process of understanding that and seeing that it's not straightforward, it's not easy. If we as if we have a heart condition, or we do something and we have an injury that harms our arm or our leg, we know exactly the path forward to get help and to have that addressed. But in this, if you have something analogous to that on the mental health side, it's like, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I get support? And quite frankly, a lot of people feel shame in talking about that, which is just heartbreaking to me, quite frankly.
Yes.
So for me, having the opportunity to join the board at Mental Health America of Greater Houston, understanding that a huge part of what they do is, advocate on behalf of folks that are having mental health challenges or concerns or issues, and just helping people find support as they go through those situations. Number one, it's very personal to me because I've had people very close to me have some of those challenges. And then honestly, I just think it's something that has become much more elevated over the last couple of years. Where people, whether they were isolated during COVID, or just the stress of going through COVID has escalated mental health concerns and challenges. So it was just, I was very honored to have Liz reach out to me, and it's been very fantastic to get connected with that organization. And then I will tell you, raising money for them was such a fun experience, because I'll be honest with you, I set my goal at I want to say I started at like $3,000 or $4,000. And as I started publicizing my, fundraising efforts, the outpouring of support was tremendous.
Wow.
And I'm just so appreciative of the people that said, "Hey, I want to get behind that. I want to support that." And I ended up raising almost $9,000, which I was, super, super excited about.
Yeah.
And I was on the leaderboard for a while.
Okay.
But I think I ended up dropping off on like the last couple of days. But I was at
Really?
number 10. I was at number 10 for the Houston Chevron Marathon for a week or two, and then I fell off. But anyway,
there you go.
It was exciting and it was fun.
That's a huge accomplishment. Do you know anyone? Do you know anyone personally who passed you up on that?
I didn't know anybody that was above me. There was actually a
Okay.
couple of other people from Mental Health America of Greater Houston that were just, a little bit below where I was, but it was a fun experience. And I will just say, if you're not familiar with that organization, if someone listening to this is not familiar with that organization, Mental Health America of Greater Houston just
Okay.
really does tremendous things in the Houston area to support really, advocacy and education to help people understand, you know, especially in education, how to identify and understand if a child maybe is having mental health issues, and how to, what the process is for helping them find support.
Yeah.
They do a lot of things to help veterans. They're also getting a lot more focus on what's called integrative healthcare, which is actually working with physical healthcare providers to
Mm.
help integrate mental and physical healthcare as part of a process of treating a patient. So I'm just really impressed by the work that they do. And if you haven't checked them out, please do, and look to see how you can support that organization. I would love that.
No, and thank you so much for speaking on that, Mark. I think it's extremely important. What I'll do is I'll put the link in the show notes for people to, if they're
Awesome.
interested, that can easily just click the link and dive into that. And you touched on, I mean, hey, I mean, we could create an episode just talking about mental health, and even more specifically in oil and gas. But on that point, I had the pleasure of chatting with Chuck Yates over at Digital Wildcatters there a couple of weeks ago. We actually did a podcast, and we talked about mental health in oil and gas, and how the cyclical nature of our business and 24/7 operations can really take a toll on people. And, for someone like myself, who essentially, I always say I grew up on a drilling rig, which I kind of did at 18. I finally grew up and, put myself on a rig, and really, it was interesting because, as a kid growing up, I'd be rough and tough, played football and basketball. And so, it's just like the toughest will survive. And going working on a drilling rig, the minute you say either I'm thirsty, hungry, tired, miss home, or anything that was kind of pressing mentally, it's at the time you didn't do that. It was, you wore your toughness as a badge of honor, and no one talked about it. And it was tough. I mean, for a long time trying to, there were maybe two or three hands on the rig that you could kind of relate to, and behind closed doors, like, man, like kind of depressed, man. Like this sucks being out here, but no one would ever admit it, in sort of a group setting on the rig floor or anything. Um, why do you think that is? And do you see it getting better? And by that, I mean sort of the mental health within oil and gas specific to drilling, because we're kind of our own breed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How would you
Yeah.
describe that now? And what are people doing, or even companies doing, to support that type of issue?
That is really cool to bring up. And I do, I often think about my team members that are out 24/7, 365, away from their families on holidays.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough role. It's a tough lifestyle at times, right? I mean, and I think for a lot of folks, it's what they know, it's what they do, and they're exceptional at being in those environments. But there's times where that is a very challenging lifestyle. And I would say one of the things that I always try to do, probably pretty much every holiday, and I know maybe this is a small gesture, but I almost always post something on social media just to thank our field team.
Yeah.
I am incredibly appreciative of them being away from home, I mean, they're providing for me and my family, right? And not
Yeah.
only that, they're providing a vital resource to our society by doing that, right? I mean, energy is so important.
Yeah.
So I think the more that we can all show appreciation for that and maybe recognize the sacrifice, I think that certainly helps. But I also think, and I love the fact that you said you and Chuck had a podcast just almost dedicated to mental health. I think the more that we talk about it,
Yeah.
like the fact that you and I are talking about this now, the fact that that'll be out there, in a public format. And really, that's why I'm trying to post a little bit more frequently on social media about mental health. Is there's no reason to feel ashamed. There's no
Right.
reason to. In fact, the more you talk about it with somebody, the better you're going to feel, because you start to understand hey, they feel this way too, and I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And um, and honestly, like if it is something that requires more help and support than just talking to someone about it,
Hmm.
getting it out there in the open and maybe talking with someone then also helps lead you down the path of, okay, I need to take that next step and maybe seek some professional help as well,
Hmm.
right? So anyway, I think, long story short, the way I think we start to really help people in those scenarios is, number one, recognizing the sacrifice that they make and showing appreciation for it. And then number two, just, continuing to openly and publicly talk about mental health and the need for support so that people understand, like, hey, there's other people out there that feel this way. And
Hmm.
there's no reason for me to feel, embarrassed or ashamed of needing some support.
Yeah, no, that you make some good points. And one thing that I've tried to do throughout my career is because, after being on a rig and working in the field as a rig hand and on the service side, it was rare to have someone from the office who does get to spend time with their families on Christmas Eve. Yeah, they might be on the phone and they have to take a call from someone chewing them out, but they're at home with their family, right?
Yeah,
So I make a point of essentially trying to build relationships with those, regardless if they're in the field or not, but give them an opportunity to express how they're doing. It's one thing to call a mud engineer or directional driller and quiz them up and down as to why they slid for X amount of feet, this and that. But when they're not dialed right into that critical path of operations at the time, ask them how their days off were. How's the family? How you feeling, man? Like, everything good? Like, is there anything? I mean, you don't necessarily have to be a babysitter, and you know what I mean? Like, there's a balance, right? But I think it's just showing you care about those folks. And again, it could be folks in the office too, right? Is I think it's us as leaders, we need to challenge ourselves to really build those meaningful relationships and make them less transactional with our employees, and really engage and make them feel comfortable to have a voice. So, open door policy, someone comes in, man, you got 5 minutes. Like, things at home are crazy. I know my work's kind of suffering, and I just wanted to express that to you because I feel like I'm not, meeting your expectations. Like, people should be okay with coming to people like that. And again, easier said than done. But I think if we create an environment where it's like, hey, you need to work hard and you need to be tough and you need to overcome challenges, but it's cool to come to me if you got issues. Like,
absolutely.
we're in this together, kind of thing. So again, not to beat that down any further, but I just think, again, like you said, the conversations, creating awareness around it, and then making sure that people within our organizations, people within ProDirectional, feel comfortable enough that they're not going to get reprimanded or verbally undressed in front of a group if all of a sudden someone's just not feeling well, and so it sounds like
Absolutely.
you're on that as well. um and so another a topic we talked about before we kicked off was, you were talking about I think it's CASA. Is that correct? Do you mind speaking about on that as well a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm also on the board of directors for CASA of Montgomery County. And so CASA is court appointed special advocate. And so for children going through the foster care system, what happens is the court will appoint these are volunteer advocates that basically support that child as they go through the foster care process and just sort of navigate, all the things that they need to navigate. And it's just, I think it's a great organization. They're providing a vital service for children. And there are CASAs across the U.S. It's a national organization. I'm actually part of the Montgomery County CASA organization,
Mm,
but there's CASAs all over the U.S. So regardless of where you are, where you're listening to this, you can also find out more about that organization and the work that they do in supporting, children in your area. And I'll tell you, it's not, it's certainly providing support for children, but you also talk about mental health, right? I
yeah.
mean, these children are undergoing a lot of trauma. I mean, they're being separated from their parents, or parents, or guardian, or whoever that may be. For me, I couldn't even imagine what that might feel like. And so, here they're being introduced into a new surrounding environment where they don't know anybody, and the process is confusing. Working through the court system, And so now they've got somebody that's been assigned to them that is in many cases the only constant that they have. They may move from foster home to foster home to foster home,
Mm-hmm.
and that advocate is going to stay with them that entire time, right? So it's sort of the one constant in their life, in many cases, the one constant in their life throughout the entire process. And someone that's just there to support them, to help them, to advocate for their best interests, to see if they have family that they can reunite them with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so again, you think about that not only in the moment of helping that child, but then also helping reduce the trauma that that child experiences throughout that process, and providing some degree of certainty for them at least, that ultimately will help with the long-term mental health of that child as well. So
Yeah.
it's a great organization doing amazing work, and I've just been really, really touched and inspired by the stories that I've seen, and the dedication of the advocates that really come in to volunteer and support these children.
Absolutely.
It's really, really amazing.
Yeah. No, again, I think it's awesome that like someone like yourself that, I mean, arguably you could probably work 24/7 focusing only on ProDirectional, but the fact that you use your time to give back and to commit to organizations like this, I think they speak volumes, right? And I think as a leader of an organization, I'm sure your employees look at that as inspiring, and I think it just sets a good precedence as to sort of the values and sort of core morals that you have within yourself that I'm sure, through osmosis, move into to other folks within your company. And so that's really cool. I want to zoom in a little bit, obviously talk about directional drilling. It's a
Yeah,
fascinating world, lots of cool technology that's been,
100%.
coming into our world. Uh, kind of on a macro level and not specific to ProDirectional, but what are you most excited about this year? And as we move forward with regards to like whether it be rig automation, directional drilling
Mhm.
technology, I mean,
Yeah.
do you see any big movements in the needle with regards to drilling operations right now that we're looking forward to seeing?
Oh my gosh, it's hard to know where to start on that, Justin. Like
Yeah.
I could literally talk for 2 hours about all the things that I'm excited about.
Well, let's talk then just specific to directional.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a
to
lot there too.
yeah, there is. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I could talk forever, but I would say
Okay.
that the thing that I think has really moved the needle for us over many things, right? But one thing that I'll kind of zoom in on a little bit is really what you touched on earlier, like remote operations and automation. And just as we have, we really started our remote operations center probably a little over 2 years ago.
Okay.
Um, oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, more longer than that, probably about 3 years ago. And time flies when you're having fun, right?
I
But
know
about
it's,
3 years
yeah,
ago,
right.
and really, just the amount of momentum that has built over the course of that 3 years is tremendous. To the point to where now, in 2023, we're going to do probably 17,000, 18,000 towers remote, right?
Wow.
I mean, just think about that: 17,000, 18,000, between 17 and 18,000 towers remote. So
So when you say that, Mark, and I don't mean to cut you off, but for those who
yeah.
maybe aren't familiar with the drilling space and without going into the weeds, how would you describe that to someone who may understand? Well, I know you drill for oil and gas, and I know there's this thing called a rig, and there you need to have a special service like you guys to be able to point and shoot. But when you say remote and the towers, can you kind of elaborate just a little bit?
Yeah, so a tower is essentially like a shift, right? So for each day, you typically have a day tower and a night tower. So you've got two guys on location, one guy covering days, one guy covering nights. And so essentially, when I say we're covering a tower remote, instead of having that person on the rig, we actually have a remote operations center at our headquarters here in Conroe, where we've located employees that are, instead of providing those services physically on the rig, they're actually providing that service from our remote operations center here in Conroe. And typically, they're able to cover like multiple rigs instead of a 1-to-1 ratio of what you might have on the rig site itself.
Right.
And there's without getting, like you said, totally in the weeds, there's a whole bunch of different configurations that we provide in terms of how we supply remote operations services. But when I say we're covering 17,000 to 18,000 towers remote, that's essentially having 17,000 to 18,000 of those shifts being covered in our remote operations center instead of a person physically on location, which, I think whenever I initially bring up remote operations, the first thing that people say is like, oh, wow, that must be saving a lot of money. And I'm always like, yeah, it is, but not in the ways that you think, right?
Okay.
Because I think the thing that everyone thinks is, okay, well, you remove a person from location, you're lowering the cost of delivering that service, which to some degree is true. But the other thing is, by bringing now we have all these people in our remote operations center and they collaborate, right? So if there's a troubleshooting problem on location, instead of just that person being isolated and by themselves until they pick up the phone and call somebody, they've got several people in the room with them to say, hey, look, I'm having this problem. Have you seen this before? And they start collaborating on troubleshooting problems. On top of that, our coordinators' offices are just outside the remote ops center. So, okay, I need help from someone, at a higher level to support me. I'm going to call in my coordinator. Our technical services director is just down the hall from them. And then our engineers are also just down the hall, right? So
Yeah.
It's like the resources at their fingertips are tremendous. And the amount, being able to troubleshoot remote now with the type of technology that we have and the communication continuity that we're able to establish, it's exceptional, right? So what we've seen, and in fact, literally just had a KPI review with a client out in Midland.
Okay.
And we had just switched from we were covering, it was MWD that we were covering, one person on location, and then we were covering with our remote ops center on the night tower or the day tower, kind of alternating. And we just switched to actually having rovers, where we've just got a couple of guys out in the field covering a multitude of rigs, and then we're covering all the towers in our remote ops center. And the client literally said, operations have never run smoother, right?
Wow.
And, in an environment where you would say, okay, well, gosh, your quality of service is going to decline when you do that. It's not. It's actually the opposite, because of, the consistency that we can provide, the level of training that we can provide, the experience that the folks in our remote operations center have. So it's really helped us deliver, a higher level of service quality, even though it's maybe a little bit counterintuitive.
Sure. No, when you brought it up and you were talking about the collaborative aspect, I never really considered that. And in my space, we're not quite there with regards to having remote ops, in the fluid space, but whenever you are around a group of people that have experience, the amount of sort of the idea bouncing, the collaboration, and the amount you can troubleshoot, the rate at which you can address problems and resolve them are probably exponentially higher. And that's, one thing that I think we do, well, I say poorly, but as an industry, we've kind of challenged ourselves with how we share information. And so whenever you can get folks together, sharing information and working together, I think that adds another element to the efficiency and just overall, productiveness of an operation. And because I was going to talk about, like, I'm sure there's buckets of value that you can articulate towards, like you said, like the economics. I mean, hopefully it drives down economics, and there's that, but then there's the point you make, and then let's be honest, like the big one too is HS&E, right? I mean, if you're having less folks on the road, less fuel, lowering hopefully the risk that you're putting people at, like all of it tied together is kind of a no-brainer. And and although this is something that it's like, oh, this makes total sense, but I mean, are people right now, so this is on the operator side, very much willing to work with, just call it the directional drilling world, to do remote ops? Or are there still some that kind of put up a bit of a hurdle to say, yeah, it sounds great and it's cool, but no, we're not doing it? I mean, do you still experience that?
I think what we see, it's a little bit of a mix, Justin. You're spot on, right? There's some folks that have maybe experienced it a little bit themselves already and have seen that, yeah, okay, this technology works. It can work if it's implemented appropriately. Tell me how you're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once we explain it, they're like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And then there's others that are, that say, hey, look, I don't know, right? I'm just not sure about it. And, so we have to help them understand the track record that we've established, that, hey, we're doing this on, 70 towers every day right now, right? 60, 70 towers every day right now. So it's not something that we're not experienced at. And then honestly, a lot of times we say, hey, come look at our remote ops center. Come see how we're running things. And they'll come to Conroe, they'll see the facility, and they'll say, okay, wow, this is impressive, right? This is something that, in your mind, it feels like a risk until you understand how it's performed. Yeah. And then you see it and you say, okay, I can see how you guys have de-risked this. And I see that you have the right processes, protocols, and technologies in place to really appropriately manage this and actually add value to my operations rather than just try and take cost out, right?
Yeah.
Because it is exactly like you said, right? I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it does lower the day rate a little bit. Okay, that's cool, and there's some savings there. But the big kickers are really, I mean, you mentioned HSE risk, so less exposure for people on location. But then the huge one is we actually further minimize potential non-productive time, which at the end of the day, that's the real benefit, that's the real value, and that's the real ultimately savings to the client. So that's what we've truly focused on, is when we're implementing technologies, it really has to be about either reducing the number of increasing performance, increasing drilling performance, lowering non-productive time, or reducing HSE risk. Those are the things that and then obviously continuing to 100% place that wellbore in the right spot, of course.
Yeah.
But those are the things that we think about from a technology perspective. Is everything that we do is focused on one of those three things, increasing drilling performance, lowering non-productive or reducing non-productive time, or reducing HSE risk, or all of those things, right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And again, I thought right away is, increasing drilling performance, perhaps better accuracy, but at the end of the day too is NP, non-productive time, NPT, as we say here in this drilling world. I mean, especially now with day rates tickling 40 and some even a little bit above,
Yes.
Time is money, and it always has been. But now, and it's crazy because when you get in unconventionals has made a lot of drilling programs very much manufacturer mode, where, I remember it was kind of a cool story is, I remember kicking a campaign off with a client. They brought their first rig out, and it was like, well, let's see how we can go from a 24-hour round trip to, cutting that in half. And that was like, if we could do that, that was amazing. Right. And so years progress, we get, we reach those targets among many other ones. Well, then, they add more rigs to the fleet. And so you're constantly getting better. And at the end of the campaign, before they went bankrupt, which a lot of people did, but I'm not going to name any names, but there's a few out there. Anyways, so we got to a point where, instead of trying to shave hours, they were literally trying to reduce cycle times to shave 10, 15 minutes. Like, that's how fine tuned all this stuff got. And it was just cool to experience that. And to your point, it's like, anytime you can keep, the bit on bottom and drilling, that's a huge win. And so, like, with that being said, Mark, would you say, so if we kind of look at, say, the accuracy in terms of when you're directional drilling, you've got a plan, you've got to get to it, and you essentially have this bullseye that you're trying to get to, for lack of better terms. Do you think we're at a point now where we've maxed out the level of accuracy that we have, or are there still things happening on the technology side to even be more accurate? Or are we shifting more to, like, how can we be more automated and stuff like that? Like, can you describe that a bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic to talk about. I would say, I mean, and I'll start it off by saying there's probably we're probably putting less emphasis on, the well placement is already very accurate.
Right.
Now, that said, spacing in some cases is becoming tighter and tighter, and we are infill drilling in a lot of these plays, right? So, if you look at anti-collision, right? Like there's definitely a lot more opportunities for anti-collision concerns.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think we put a lot of focus on making sure that 100% of the time we are on top of wellbore placement, and implementing all the best technologies, all the right protocols, and using it when appropriate third parties to refine accuracy even further. So we're definitely putting a lot of emphasis there. But I do think when it comes to, and like you said earlier, it's like drilling is a continuous optimization process, right? And you initially start these campaigns and say, okay, we're trying to shave out half a day or a day, and then over time it's like, okay, well, how can we shave off another 20 minutes, 30 minutes? And so you start thinking about, okay, how can we get surveys up faster? How can we get how can we get our mean time between failure from 4,500 hours to 4,750 hours, right? So it's like, over time, you're just trying to, it's just that continuous optimization process. And the cool thing about directional drilling is like, it's a system of systems, right? So if you think about a BHA, obviously you've got a bit, you've got a motor, but even in a motor, right? A motor is a lower end, which a lower end is made up of, dozens of different components. And then you've got a power section, which is a multitude of different components. And then you've got an MWD string, which is, literally hundreds of components, which everybody thinks of MWD as one thing, right? So it's literally a system of systems. And if you look at that stack of reliability, all these different systems stack up from a reliability perspective.
Yeah.
And so it's really what we look at is diving into each one of those subsystems and saying, okay, how do we take this component from, a life of 1,000 hours to a life of 1,200 hours or a life of 1,500 hours? And how do we take this component that is susceptible to shock and vibration and really, further ruggedize it so that it is less susceptible to shock and vibration? Oh, and while we're on the topic of shock and vibration, how do we minimize shock and vibration so that it's less of an issue for the for the BHA, right? So so when our engineers are thinking through those problems, and when our engineers and operations teams are thinking through those problems, that's how we're really breaking it down and saying, okay, what's the next component that we try to optimize even further, so we can just enhance the service delivery that we have.
Right. No, it's fascinating. It's always I've always had an appreciation for the directional world. It just always seems like there's new motors or new MWD, or it's just always something kind of new coming down into the drilling operation. And the sandbox that I play in is it's been very much the same for a long time. And so while we have some some cool technology that we deploy, and it's regular, but a lot of times doesn't quite, unless it's like a system that allows a operator to save a casing string, it's not very often talked about. But how would you, so I have a bit of a two-part question here, kind of on top of what we've been talking about, is how would you describe the future of directional drilling, and how is ProDirectional positioning themselves and differentiating themselves in order to capture and be part of the future of directional drilling?
Yeah, that's great. And I do think, the future of directional drilling will be continuing to use more automation, lowering the, let's call it, personnel intensity of delivering that service. And again, it's not so much for the purpose of reducing people, but it's more for the purpose of automating processes so that they're repeatable, they are consistent, they are accurate.
Yeah.
Reducing manual inputs, and just using technologies that continue to make deploying tools and assets and putting them in the well a more repeatable process that requires less manual intervention on location. So what I would say, how we are positioning and how we've tried to position ourselves over the last several years is just, we are continuing to invest in technologies that automate processes, that, make the deployment of assets and the ability to pick up those tools in the field easier,
Okay.
and make remote troubleshooting easier, make the setup of systems on location to gather information require less people. So it's all about just making it easier, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
hit the easy button and you've got directional drilling, right? So
Yeah.
that's really what I would say we're focused on, in terms of the future of directional drilling, and really just getting it to the point where over time, it can be a process that just doesn't require as many people to be on location full time to deliver that service. And maybe that means they're in a different location delivering
Right.
that service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No,
so
that's
that's
no, that's a great answer. And I mean, I think now is a better time than ever to continue to invest heavily into technologies because, a lot of times, especially us in oil and gas, we romanticize on what's gotten us to where we're at without realizing we have to evolve, we have to change, we have to adopt to just essentially keep up. And it's a competitive marketplace, right? I know directional drilling is extremely competitive. And unless you're constantly pushing forward and thriving to overcome the status quo, you're gonna, market share is gonna dictate, or that's gonna dictate market share. And and even in a point where it's gonna require, I mean, the goal for a lot of operators is okay, less rigs, same amount of footage or more. And so naturally, I don't know if we're going to get back to 1,000 rigs in the US anytime soon. I doubt it. I don't think the
yeah.
capacity's there. I don't think the manpower's there. And so as the rig count shrinks, how are people stepping outside the box? And whether that's through some interesting JV work, interesting technology that maybe hasn't been considered, these things are going to have to continuously be looked at and evaluated, and hopefully they make business sense. Because if not, then there can be some challenges on that front. But no, it's exciting to see where you guys are at. I've kind of, I've had my arms or at arm's length to folks at ProDirectional, and so they're always good group of people. But I want to, before we close out, and we're getting close to the hour here already, but I want to just take a minute to talk a little bit about your perspective on not necessarily, drilling, but just the importance of fossil fuels. Because I would imagine, just speaking with you and kind of getting to know you, I would say you're an energy advocate. I would sense that you're not out there, doing anti-renewable campaigns or anything. But obviously, the success is determined by rig count. But at the end of the day, I'd like you to speak just on, like, how would you articulate the importance of fossil fuels to those who may be just skeptical and who maybe sort of buy into the narrative that perhaps media has been pushing heavily as of late?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just start off by saying, like, I'm so proud to be a part of this industry. I think what we do is vital. It's literally, vital is like not even strong enough of a word, right? It's like it's required.
Sure.
Um, and if you look at the things that we need as humans, right? Like, like just let's get basic here, right? Like
Yeah.
we need water, we need food, just to survive. And then the thing that establishes quality life is really energy.
Yeah.
And we as Americans, honestly, are just and North Americans, if you're Canadian, are just so fortunate to really be in a place where energy is cheap, it's affordable, it's abundant, it's at our fingertips. There's many parts of the world where that's not the case, right? I mean, if you go to parts of Africa, the number one source for fuel is dung, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of shocking, right? That's the how comfortable we are with things is just we're very blessed and fortunate. So for me, I just feel like I think that that what we do as an industry is just so important for the world. I think continuing to provide cheap and affordable energy, or I guess cheap and abundant energy,
Mm-hmm.
is huge. And I also think, and something that I think is just so represented and maybe even not really well understood is how big of a benefit natural gas has been to the world, right? If you look at carbon emissions in the U.S. over the course of the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
they have continued to decline because of the adoption of natural gas as a fuel source, right? I mean, you talked about the electrification of the world and certainly of the U.S. And the continued move towards electricity as a growing source of energy. Well, I mean, natural gas provides the fuel that produces a lot of that electricity, and its displacement of coal has resulted in, honestly, the U.S. reducing its carbon emissions, right?
Right.
So and the U.S. is such a natural gas powerhouse, right? And we kind of hit on it earlier in the segment here, but that's as LNG terminals come online and as natural gas becomes more of a global commodity. It was 20 years ago a 100% regional commodity where it was trapped because you couldn't move natural gas to different markets. As LNG terminals come online, that shifts, and the U.S. can become even bigger player in the global supplier of natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, long story short, I'm not against solar or wind or anything else. I think anything that makes sense overall should be supported.
Yeah.
And as different forms of energy make sense from an economic and from a reliability perspective, I think that they should all be supported, because everything that we have is a finite resource. So
Of course.
I'm completely not saying go one way or the other, but I do think we as an industry, even though sometimes we get a bad rap, I think we've done so many things that are just amazing to supply energy to the world. And I think the future that we have, especially continues to produce oil, but also shifting towards providing more and more natural gas over time, can be also a massive environmental benefit over time. So I'm looking forward to that future for our industry, and also I'm hoping that the events over the last year and moving forward also continue to shine a little bit of a brighter light on the good things that we do
Right.
as an industry. But I think we also have to all advocate as well, and make sure it's understood the things that we are doing to provide for society.
Yeah. No, and I mean, again, that's a very healthy approach. And the more people that I talk to in many different verticals within energy really have a very similar ideology of where we're at, where we need to be, and what it's going to take to get there. I think the extremes on either sides are the ones that typically, kind of put people in buckets, because everyone wants to belong to a camp. It's you're either for or against us, and which is just, we already have a huge problem with divisiveness here in the US. It's like, why do we have to bring energy into it too? Which unfortunately it always goes to sort of down that path. But to your point, I think it's just, it's about, it's educating, it's informing people and providing enough information in a kind, combative way to just give people the information that can then they can then help themselves make better decisions, whether that's policy, whether that's legislation, whether that's voting, whether that's even just energy efficiency in your home. There's a lot of where the amount of energy that we waste, and there's a bunch of graphs and data out there, but because we're built on the backbone of cheap energy, we take it for granted. Like you said, there's places all over the world that would probably, there's families that would give up their firstborn child to live a day in the US and have an abundant of, there's some places like talk about leaving your cell phone plugged in all night. They'd be like, oh my goodness, you can do that. You know what I mean? But to us, we just plug this in, plug that in, leave this on. And it's, and we take it for granted. But at the end of the days, we're so fortunate, and it's again, us as in the US or North America or any, thriving economy, it's how can we help others who don't have access to the same privileges we have, And, we talked on, the economy. And if you look at a lot of the richest nations, GDP is directly tied to energy consumption and the access to reliable, affordable, and, abundant amount of it. And so it's like, where does that come from? A lot of it's built on the backbone of fossil fuels. Everything else is coming to the table, but it's going to take time. And I think that's the component that people are realizing is it's not this on off switch. Because it is truly a transition into, like, we're always transitioning. But again, I appreciate that answer, and it's a good conversation, and it's one that I hope people on both sides of the fence can finally come together, whether it's in office or it's on the street at a gas station. Like, it's just, the more we
Yes.
talk about it, I think the more, at least, we're making progress, which is super cool. And so, with that said, Mark, I really appreciate it. I want to respect your time. If people are interested to get to know more about either you or ProDirectional, what's the sort of the best way for people to reach out and learn?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, obviously, check out our website, prodirectional.com. We're also on social media, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well.
Which
So
is awesome. I commend you for that big time.
yeah. I think it's a great platform. I love it.
Sweet.
So yeah, reach out to me, reach out to any of the members of the ProDirectional team, either through social media or through our website, and we love to connect. So I definitely
Great.
appreciate you having me on, Justin, and really enjoyed the discussion today. Thanks so much.
Likewise. Well, everyone, I appreciate you tuning in. And before we log off, I'd like to quickly close out by sharing some information about a new partnership that we've landed with Oil Patch. It's your daily energy news fix in 5 minutes or less. Think hustle or morning brew for energy. So please do them a favor and subscribe using the link in the show notes, or go to theoilpatch.co. Everyone, again, thanks for listening. And always remember that everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.